Okay, so in the previous two lessons, you got a general idea of how to work with bounds. There's still a few more things that we need to look at, but we can only look at them once we start to attach the actual vertices on the figure to these individual bounds. So wherever the bound goes, the vertices will follow, giving us the ability to pose our character. So before we start, let's go ahead and make sure that the armature is selected over here. And you want to switch to object mode over here and make sure that this is set on median point. This is set on a global over here. And snapping should be off, and this should be set on increment. Let's go ahead and first save this as a new file. Go under File, Save As, and save it as Rigging Lesson 01. G.blend. Okay, so as you have seen that when it comes to working with an armature, there are basically two modes over here. Edit mode is where we get to create all our bounds, place them, and set up the parent-child relationships. And pose mode is where we get to see the parent-child relationships working, and of course, pose the bounds, meaning move the bounds wherever we want to, right? So the relationship between these two modes, it's really in the parent-child relationship setup. So you'll get to understand how to understand pose mode better once we start getting into creating the non-deformed bounds. So what we're going to do right now is take a look at what exactly is going to happen when we start to attach the armature to our figure. Or you could say is that we're going to be attaching the figure to the armature. Okay, so go ahead and click on the figure first. And over here, I want you to click on the modifiers tab. So this is called your modifiers stack. Basically, you can add multiple modifiers to give you the results that you're looking for your 3D model. So over here you can see that we have the mirror modifier, and over here we have the subsurf modifier or the subdivision modifier. So the mirror modifier will mathematically create the right side of the figure, so you only have to do half the work, and the subdivision surface modifier basically adds mathematically more faces on to your figure. So let's first go ahead and zoom in over here, shift middle mouse button. Now over here we can actually delete this and delete this over here. So you can see that this is actually our original model. Let's go ahead on the armature and actually shut it off so we don't see it right now. Go ahead and switch to edit mode over here. So you can see that if I press the A key to select everything, A key to deselect everything, this is our original model that we had developed in volume 1 using the formula-based system. And as I had stated, that this is kind of useless model for us because it's very low resolution. But you can use this model later in the future if you decide to use it as a collision detector. But right now it's just low resolution. And if we go to object mode, you can see that we can definitely see that it looks like a human figure. So you can still come in here and adjust some of these vertices if you need a low polygon model. Now let's go ahead and first switch to object mode. So over here under the modifiers tab, you can see that it says generate over here, and here we're just going to add back the mirror modifier. So this basically means that when it says generate, it's going to mathematically generate the right side of your figure. And we can go ahead and just turn this on, make sure clipping is on. And if we switch to edit mode, you can see that this side over here of the figure is being mathematically generated for you. Okay, so at all times in the 3D view, this over here really does not exist. It's basically mathematically being generated. So it means that Blender is always creating and calculating the right side of your figure. Okay, Now, let's go ahead and now add the subdivision surface modifier. So when we add this modifier, this basically takes the low resolution version of our figure that we created in volume 1 and gives you more faces so you can get a better looking model. So if we switch this to object mode, you can see that when we do shift middle mouse button and come in where the face is to the middle mouse button to rotate, it's giving us more faces to work with. So here on the view, if we turn this off to 0, this is how the model is originally. The low resolution model. Remember, at all times, the right side is being calculated mathematically. Now, when you click on the subdivision levels to 1, meaning that show us the subdivision levels of 1 in the view, the 3D view, and this is the render when you actually render your image. We only care about the view over here. So right now what's happening is that Blender is now mathematically creating the faces all over this figure, right? So this means the left side and the mathematically generated right side, which is being done by the mirror modifier. So just think about what I just said here. So the mirror modifier is mathematically generating the right side of the figure, and the subdivision surface is mathematically giving you more faces to make your figure look nicer all over the figure. This means the left and the right. Now, if we press the Z key on this, you can see that how the subdivision surface is creating more and more faces. So if we turn this off to 0, you can see that this is our original figure. But over here, if we click on 1, this is what it's doing. And now if we increase this to 2, you're going to see that that is quite a bit of faces that the subdivision is creating. All of this is being done mathematically. Okay, so we're just going to press the Z key to go into solid view. Now you can see that the figure looks super realistic or hyper realistic over here. Okay, so this is what the modifier stack does. Now, in order to use the bone system, basically attach the vertices to these individual bones, we would have to use a deform modifier, which is called armature. Okay, so if we click on this over here, you can see that when you add this armature modifier, it's asking you for the armature that you want to use. So when you move the bones, the vertices will follow on your figure. So right now, go ahead and click this and select armature. Okay, so here is the armature that is being attached to your figure. Now, if you click on the armature and now switch to pose mode over here, go ahead and click on the arm, do shift middle mouse button over here. Press the R key. Now, you're going to see that we can actually start to pose the arm, but the figure is not moving. Right click to cancel this, okay? Now, the reason the figure is not moving is because now when you click on the figure, you can see that it's saying that it's going to bind to vertex groups, meaning that if you have the figure selected, which we have right now, and go over here, there are no vertex groups, meaning that this is where we're going to tag the vertices so they can follow the individual bones. So you're going to see a little later how this is going to work, okay? What's important to understand here is this concept of the modifier stack. This is mathematically generating the right side of the figure. This is mathematically generating more faces all over the figure. And this over here will allow us to move the bones on our figure, okay? And it's going to use the vertex groups, meaning when there are vertices tagged to follow the individual bones, this modifier is what's going to allow us to move the figure. So meaning that this, of course, is also going to be doing all that stuff behind the scenes mathematically. Okay, so this means that when you click on the bone and press the R key, you'll notice that it's kind of jerking over here, right? There's a lot of calculations going on inside the 3D view. So we're going to click on the figure over here, and we're going to open up the subdivision surface. Let's go ahead and turn this all the way to 0, and now click on the bone and press the R key. Notice that how smooth it is, how fast it is, okay? So this means that when we click on the figure and just click this to 1, now click on the bones, press the R key, you can see that it's a little slower over here, okay? So this means that when we start to assign the vertices to follow these individual bones, and when you click on the bone and press the R key to move, it's going to be at this speed over here, right? So this means that when you have a subdivision surface modifier, you need to make sure that the subdivision level is at 1. Remember, you're not going to apply this modifier. You would only do this at the very end, after everything is rigged and you're satisfied with the movement of the bones and how the vertices have been binded to the individual bones. Once you're ready to move on to the UV unwrapping, this is the last step you do. Okay, so what this means is that, okay, if we think about this from a logical point of view, we can say that actually the armature is in the wrong place. The modifier's stack is not ordered correctly. We would have to click on this arrow to bring up the armature modifier, because if you think about it, the figure should be mirrored first, then we should get to move the vertices for the figure, then Blender should mathematically create the rest of the faces. Okay, so in the modifier stack, when you have an armature modifier, it needs to be before the subdivision surface. So these additional faces that the subdivision surface is going to create must be done at the very end. If you do it before, then it's if you think about it, it's like, okay, mathematically generate the right side of the figure, then mathematically generate all the faces, the additional faces for the figure. Now move those mathematically generated faces when we move the bones, right? So that's going to give you really odd results, especially in the joint areas, and it's going to make it difficult for Blender to give you the best results. But if we have the mirror modifier first, right, then the armature modifier, where we can move the low resolution version of the vertices first with the armature modifier, then we tell Blender to add the rest of the faces that are going to be mathematically generated. Everything is going to work a lot better, and you're going to get better deforms on the figure, and it's going to work obviously a little faster. Okay, so this is how the modifier stack works. Now this is not just useful when you're dealing with the armature modifier. This is also going to be useful when you are creating clothing with the shrink wrap modifier, skin, solidify, right? All these modifiers have to be in the correct order. So you have to logically think about what Blender is doing inside the 3D view. Okay, so over here, now you understand how this is done. So go ahead and get rid of the armature modifier, because right now it's not going to do anything. Okay, so what we're going to do is actually first go ahead and save this file over here. Okay, so now go ahead and turn on the subdivision surface modifier. So you've seen that we have to click over here and attach the armature deform modifier to our figure, and then we have to click over here and select the armature. Then we have to come in over here and move it up above the subdivision surface so it can work correctly. Go ahead and X this out. Now we're going to take a look at how we can tell Blender to do this automatically. Now, in order for this to work, what we have to do is basically make the figure the child of the armature. So you can look at it this way. You can say that, okay, the armature is going to be the parent of our figure, meaning that each individual bone is going to be the parent of the vertices that surround them. So wherever the parent, which is the bone that's going to move, the children, which are the vertices, will follow their parent. Okay, so right now we're not going to look at that step. We just want to look at how Blender and the armature deform. So the way we can do this is simply go into the outliner, click on our figure right over here, click the left mouse button and move this and drop it on top of the armature. When you let your mouse go, it's going to give you a bunch of options over here. What you want to do is just select armature deform. When you click this, you'll see that Blender is going to automatically set up the armature deform for you, and it's going to set the armature as the object to use. Now notice that the figure has been moved inside the armature. If you click this, you'll see that the figure is right now the child. Now if we click on this figure with the left mouse button and drag it out over here, you'll see that it says drop to clear parent. When you do that, it's going to remove the armature deform. Okay, so this is how we can tell Blender to do this automatically. Now another way to do this is that you can simply click on the figure, which is going to be the child first, go find the parent by clicking on the shift key, and now right clicking on the armature. Notice that it's blue because we are in pose mode. We can actually switch this to object mode over here. We're going to do A to deselect everything and do that again. You can click on this, press the shift key down, click on the armature. Now when we do Control P, it's going to give us the same options. Here we're going to do armature deform. Now notice that because we had the armature selected as the last object, it's only going to show you the options for that armature over here. So go ahead and do Control P and then do armature deform. You'll see that it does the same thing. Now if we click on this figure over here, you can see that we get the armature modifier over here. So this means that when you do it this way, when you tell Blender to automatically add the armature deform, we have to come in on the figure, select it, go to the modifiers tab, and then we have to manually make it go above the subdivision surface. So this is a step you need to get used to because you're going to be doing this later. So go ahead and X this out. Okay. Now we're going to click on this figure and just again do the same thing, clear the parent. Okay. Now notice that when we click on the armature and now switch to pose mode over here, click on the figure, press the shift key down, click on this, do Control P, we still get the same options. So we can click on armature. Then when we click on the figure, you can see that it's just going to do the same thing over and over again. We still have to make it go above this. Okay. Now go ahead and actually let's not exit out, let's click over here on the figure and move it out and drop it. So you'll see that it'll just automatically remove the armature deform. Okay, so let's go ahead and now just save this file, and we're going to take a look at this concept in a little more detail in the next lesson. Thank you.